Welcome to the Channel Surfers. I'm John McCabe, co-host, and I'm joined as always by my very good friend and co-host Jeff Lennon. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, John. I'm doing great, man. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. And part of the reason I'm doing so wonderful is because we're going to talk about ecosystems today. I think channel ecosystems are a really important topic, and I know for myself, I've always tried to figure out and understand what an ecosystem is all about. And the more I learn, the more I understand it and really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think what we want to talk about today, uh, there are at least five major categories of a partner ecosystem that shape today's channel, strategies, and they draw from a lot of current research. Particularly from a good friend of the show's, Jay McBain, and his
Yeah.
Media Global Partner 1000. And a lot of that information is so valuable to understand what an ecosystem, really it looks like, and who the players in those ecosystems, right? I
Yep.
think to better understand it, we want to start by breaking down those five major categories that make up a partner ecosystem. And I think that's something that you have studied and have a handle on.
Yeah. I don't know if I wouldn't say studied, but no, I've obviously we're both students of the
Hmm.
channel, so to
Yeah, yeah.
speak, right? I mean, I'm constantly learning, and we've talked about this on a couple previous episodes. What I find interesting is the artificial intelligence AI, right, is speeding things up. I mean, it is getting super crazy on how fast it is speeding things up, and it's also changing the dynamics of the ecosystem. So just to kind of set the table. So the study that you're referencing, and I want to make sure at some point, well, I'll put down here in the corner from the study, there's this really interesting graphic. And when you see the graphic, it'll kind of blow your mind because it's an eye chart.
Hmm.
And there
Yeah.
are just so many different organizations within the ecosystem. And again, when we talk about the five categories, I want to be fair. This isn't something that you or I kind of came up with. This is the five major categories that kind of came out of the the study, the write up from Jay McBain and his
Hmm. Yeah.
organization. But what I found really super interesting is the shift that's happening, right? And the challenge is, the partner ecosystem is no longer one dimensional, right? You have to look at how you're kind of delving into these different categories and different organizations, and as we kind of talk through it, the thing that I found super interesting was when you say the name of an organization, you go, oh, that's a GSI,
Hmm.
or oh, that's an advisory company. And
Yeah.
then as you start talking, well, they also do this now. Oh, so they're also an MSP. Oh, well, they're also doing that, and it's kind of like,
Everything
so
bleeds.
everybody's kind of,
Hmm.
yeah, exactly,
Yep.
exactly. So anyway, pardon me. So I what I found interesting is when I read through the study, and it kind of caught me. So afterwards I went back and I was looking at the diagram, and then you and I had talked, and I'm like, I think this would be a really great episode, and it might even be two when you think about it, because to try to peel back the layers on this. So when I went through it, I mean, it's basically the five categories as they lay out,
Hmm.
and people can argue or dispute it. It's fine. But it comes down to, you've got your GSIs, you got your consulting and advisory groups,
Yep.
you've got your MSP, MSSP outsourcing groups,
Yep.
and then the category that most of us are very, very familiar with, the resellers, the VARs, and distributors, which we've played in a lot of that for a long time.
Sure. Sure.
And
Talk
then
about it a lot.
yeah,
Yep.
and then the sorry. And then I guess the fifth one is the one that I've always found the most interesting, just because of my technical background, is
Hmm.
what they call in the study, they call it the specialized or the tech ecosystem partners, the
Hmm. Hmm.
technical partnerships. And I've often shared this with people, because what I found interesting in my career is a lot of these back in the day, they weren't even called eco. They were called technology partnerships. So you would have a
Yeah.
technology partnership. And if you could take that technology partnership where you have a product that does X and we have a product that does Y, we bring it together and all of a sudden we're doing something magical. That's great. That's a good technical partnership, because now
Yep.
you're adding value to a client. But if you can get those two organizations, or get that partnership where you're now impacting or driving significant revenue, say, high 7, 8 figures, consistently,
Mhm.
it then becomes a strategic partnership. It's still a
Yeah.
technical partnership, but now it's strategic to the organization.
We call them alliances too, like technical alliances, right?
Correct.
And I think the beauty of those, and not to take away from all the other categories here, but I think the beauty of the tech alliance or the tech specialized tech ecosystem partners, it helps you grow your business. It helps a reseller do more business because it can take multiple tech alliance partners and bundle them up and sell them to a client. And if they work well together, and this is something like I go back to your days at FireEye, you did this for a while and you were really good at finding the money in those tech alliance relationships, right? And that's what you're trying to do with a tech alliance. Do they always work out? I've been involved in a lot of tech alliance relationships where some of them are good, some of them are not. I've had one company that was so good
Yeah.
they acquired the company I was working for. We were so aligned, but then we've had companies that were not aligned, and nobody wants to sell your product. You don't want to sell their product, but if you go through a reseller, they'll sell them both for you, right? So I
Oh,
find that to
absolutely.
be one of the most important categories in that list.
No, I don't disagree. What I found interesting in the study, my takeaway was they leaned more towards the GSI
Mm-hmm.
and the consultant relation or advisory for interesting reasons, right? Because, and by the way, it's their impact can be so much bigger, so much broader, right?
Yeah.
When you think about what I always found interesting about the consultants or consultancy or advisory service firms, it's basically you're building trust with an organization
Mm-hmm.
that owns that use case
Yeah.
before the tech even shows up. Like
Yeah. It's not there.
you've already
They're
right.
recommending it.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
and because you're basically which totally makes sense, right? You're trying to solve the problem and figure out what they're doing, how they're doing what they're doing, how do you make it better, right? I go back to my three: people, process, technology. But when you see that, it's like the technology, if I always say it last because it's about the people in the process. We'll figure out what we need to do. The challenge I had for a long time was a lot of these firms. I'll probably get a lot of hate mail about this. Is they they made self-fulfilling prophecies. It's probably the
Mm.
best way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
So they would create things and then they would go build it.
Yeah.
Instead of finding it off the shelf, something in the market that could, do it, they would go and build it. And you saw a lot in the from, I'm going to say 2012 through probably, well, maybe even 2011.
Yeah.
You saw a lot of that start to go away because what ended up happening is people created proprietary solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it then became cost prohibitive to manage and maintain it, you know? Um,
Well,
but anyway, I found it interesting.
go back to our days at
Go ahead.
EMC. I mean, where we were at in Documentum, a lot of companies were creating products off of our product, right? And then there were the GSIs that were actually going into these large enterprise government clients and building systems around what we do, right? But they were not reselling that product. They were, building a technology that utilizes our product, right? So I find like we've been around these types of partners before. In
Yeah.
your opinion, in your experience, um, kind of share with us where you've interacted with these
Ooh.
types of partners and what kind of interaction you've had. Like I've got personal interaction with the GSIs from my days at
Yep.
EMC. They helped me close my biggest deal ever. Right. I deal with MSPs all the time. I build programs around that. I understand that world. The consulting and advisory, I don't really have a lot of experience working with them in my roles. But the resellers and the specialized tech alliances, oh yeah, for sure. But like,
Yeah.
give us your like take on each one of those and what your experience has been.
So, first of all, I love when you put me on the spot. No, well, first of all, they all bring different values.
Hmm.
right? So everybody brings a different value set to the table. The one thing I will give a lot of credit to when you look at the GSIs, global system integrators. Sorry, we keep saying
Hmm.
acronyms, so my apologies for people out there. But your global system integrators, right? So your Accentures, your Deloittes, and this is where it gets, PwC, EY,
Hmm.
KPMG, even IBM, right? Even though IBM is they have a GSI aspect, but they also have a product aspect. They also have a MSP aspect. Like, you get where I'm going. Like, a lot of these bleed into multiple aspects of the group. But to answer your question, I would say from a excuse me, from a GSI perspective, um, what's interesting is it's all about, high volume, long cycles, and
Hmm.
strategic alignment are probably the three
Yes.
keys, right? So it's they're getting in at a much higher strategic level. So I know, working with some of the organizations I've had the opportunity, enterprise companies, we used to make a matrix of where the different companies were. So you'd have the GSI list, that you had your offshores, you had like all the tech
Hmm.
companies.
Hmm.
So you could figure out where we were going to fit. We did a lot of that at EMC because it was all based on the strategy of I used to, again, where I developed the term, where we sit and how we fit.
Hmm.
Right. So, but when I see GSIs, that's kind of the big three that comes out to me. It's about looking at larger figure deals, bigger sales cycles, but having that strategic alignment.
I,
When you
I
get into, go ahead,
I'm just
sorry.
let me interrupt you quick. I kind of relate GSIs to like a big oak tree with lots of roots that get deep, right? They will go in and they will get deep in an organization and build services upon services so they can continue, right? And they're building programs, they're building applications, they're doing things. So they're like a big oak tree that has deep roots, right? And you
Yep.
just kind of alluded to that a little bit. That's why I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, there's the best part is there's so many cool analogies, right? And that one makes a lot of sense, right? So when we pivot now, right, to the
Hmm.
consultant organizations or advisory firms,
Hmm.
and again, just it's a combination. I shouldn't say it's all my take. It's a combination of my take and a lot what I was pulling out of this write up, which I found really insightful. Was there the consultant and advisory groups? They're looking a lot at the compliance and governance of an organization, so they're leaning in there. That's why you always hear, oh, this the award shows, oh, we're using PwC. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know they focus a lot on compliance and governance. And they're also strategic because they're also looking to plan things, and they have an opportunity to influence the cycle, the business cycles, at a very, very, early stage, but also have it set up that it's tied to their strategic vision. When we start to come down into the MSPs and what they call the MSP outsourcers, resellers, VARs, distributors, which is, I said, probably our favorite group. But when I
Hmm.
started looking at those groups, right, the MSPs are all about operational execution of a service. And what's great is you could have a product, but you don't do anything. You're selling the product, right? So I'm kind of jumping ahead here to the resellers. But if you sell a product, people may not have the people they need to run and manage it. So this is
Yeah,
where a
yeah.
managed service provider comes in. So he's there to help kind of drive the operational execution, drive the services, become an extension of that team, help drive, IT continuity and security continuity and compliance continuity for an organization with the resources that can actually drive the boat, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. Look,
Um,
I find like GSIs, they do little MSSP type work now in security, but there's a big difference, I think, because they will build everything for a customer. They'll build their SOC out, they'll build all the programs and applications. Whereas an MSSP is really someone's looking for a client who needs that protection. They're going to utilize tools that they buy from vendors and they're going to go put them into play.
Absolutely.
Whereas a GSI might build a security tool
Hmm.
for a client, right? And but again, like I said earlier, I think everything bleeds into the GSIs, bleed into the consultings, bleed into the MSSPs, bleed into the resellers because the resellers are working with the MSSPs to sell them or sell with them the licensing. And then the tech alliances, hey, if there's a better together story with two two technologies, and MSSP is going to utilize them for their practice, right?
Well, the MSPs have to work with multiple technologies,
Yeah.
but I think you nailed it. We both had an opportunity. I mean, working at in a previous life, as I like to call it, not a job, but a previous life, I had the opportunity to work with EY, right? So
Mm-hmm.
EY kind of falls into a GSI category.
Oh
They
yeah, for
also
sure.
fall into the consulting advisory because they do the financial stuff, but they
Mm-hmm.
also had an MSP arm.
Yep.
And what was interesting about them, which great guys, great team, great gal, great people, I should say. They were working with they weren't locked into a specific thing, but they did have kind of their standard products.
Yeah.
But they were an MSP, and
Yep.
they were pretty good and pretty robust at what they did, and they had some really really smart people on those teams. So I do find it interesting, and I think you bring up a good point where it kind of blends into it. It
Mm-hmm.
blends into that those first three categories get really kind of the water gets cloudy.
But here's the
um
thing
so
to remember with that comment that you just made. We both agree everything bleeds in, but in an ecosystem, everything works together, right? Like look at an Apple ecosystem, for example. The iPhone and the iPad and your MacBook and everything, you could just turn it on and it recognizes. Like my watch opens my MacBook every morning when I come into my office, right? It unlocks it. So I mean, that's what an ecosystem is supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be like combining everything as one to live as one, right?
right,
Like
right.
it's you're not there shouldn't be like a differentiation to an extreme because you want everything to work together, right? And I think what we're seeing is these are all they're partners that work similarly and together, right? Because a GSI will get a vendor involved and the vendor will get a reseller involved or an MSSP involved. And like it just kind of like dovetails off of it. And that's what an ecosystem is really designed to do, is to bring everything together as one. So you have all your bases covered and there's no drop off, right? And I think I use the Apple ecosystem because I think
Yeah,
everything you do with your Apple devices works everywhere. You could just get a new device, everything's on there. Everything works with your AirPods or your watch or your MacBook or like it's just. And I think what we're trying to
it just
highlight,
works. No,
yeah,
to your point, it just
everything
works.
works together. Right?
I always tell people a funny story. When I got my first iPhone, not to I was like, I probably should work for these guys. But I had to wait until the iPhone, I think it was the 3S, so that
Mm-hmm.
because it had access to Exchange, because I was like, I can't use it. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as I came out with it, I
We're
got it. I'll
BlackBerry
never
guys,
forget it.
right? Yeah.
John, I bought it. I walked out. I sat in my car, and that was it. I just kind of sat there and went, that's it. It works. Like, literally, like, holy shit.
Yeah.
That blew my mind. I think it was 2007.
Yeah.
My mind was blown, and after that I was just like, wow, here I am in IT. I'm an Intel guy, I would say, or whatever. But I was just like, man, after that, I was forever kind of started to really push into the Apple technology because they just made it simple, and
Mm-hmm.
their thing to say, oh, here's how you use it. It was like this little piece of paper. It's like it was.
Yeah. But again, the beauty of that is it works. Everything's working together. There's no border
Yeah,
or line delineating, right? And I think we try to build a partner ecosystem. You're looking to build something where your technology, Jeff Lennon cybersecurity software can touch each one of these categories and they'll work with you to either build around it, consult about it, support it from a security standpoint and manage it,
right.
resell it, or combine your technology with something else to become a bigger and better technology to help customers. So I think everything compares to the Apple ecosystem in this case because we're building something that will consistently help each other down the
You're
line.
bridging. You're
Yeah.
you're bridging
Yeah.
you're bridging a gap because you have these, two disparate technologies that are doing two important things for an organization. And again, sometimes there's some overlap, like, oh, well, we do that. Well, so do we. But to
Mm-hmm.
your point, it's finding a way to actually bring that in. Like one of the things that always intrigued me when I was working at an ISV, and even, before I went to work for EMC, was seeing the value that you could bring to another product, right? And it's hard because people say, well, we're good with that. Yeah, but if we do this, then you'll get this. And it's really about the innovation, right? So one of the things I found interesting working at an ISV and technology partnership and
Mm-hmm.
driving that was it really is the last mile of innovation, right? Because you're now taking something that maybe there was a gap, maybe there was a manual process, or these two systems didn't even talk to each other. And now all of a sudden you're bringing it together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where that technology partner ecosystem kind of comes together. And
So,
I don't want to, God, I'm sorry.
no, I was gonna say, who drives the most impact in those types of partnerships?
If there's always going to be a lead dog, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it varies. And I think where you had mentioned earlier, again, just my opinion, where a lot of these fail is the ego gets in the way for organizations, and they think
Mm-hmm.
that they're the bigger dog. And I've seen, $30 million companies driving $1 billion companies because
Mm-hmm.
they did something really super unique. So it's not always the bigger one that's driving it. It's the one that's creating the value of the synergy that
Mm-hmm.
actually is important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, coming back to why so many times I've seen it not be successful, and it's understanding, right? I used to tell people I'm a big Stephen Covey guy. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. So whenever you're working with a partnership, always trying to understand, what are they doing, what are they trying to do, what are their values, what is their mission, and then take the step back and figure out, how does this align, how do I make this align to what we are doing, so that it just comes across as, wow, this makes sense. Like we're actually we're kind of doing the same thing. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to solve the same problem,
Yeah.
and without being overt, or I'm not you're not trying to fool people, but you're really trying to understand, what are you trying to do, and how
Yeah.
how can I get that alignment so that you see that I want you to win. And I kind of take a step back. I don't see as much as it as I'd like to. I think there is still a lot of it out there, but I think AI is reshaping that tremendously right now. But we won't. I don't want to get in that rabbit hole. But real quick before I forget, I wanted to come back. So the one that we jumped over is the one that we probably spent the most time. We've talked about in a lot of previous podcasts, which is the reseller, the VARs, and
Mm-hmm.
distributors.
Yep.
And what I found, and we've had some different people on a couple podcasts. We want to try to get some people from distribution and some of the different resellers, because I think hearing from them their value. But the one thing I will say, and I see this in different levels of the business, but they're typically the ones that own the relationship with the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
Jay McBain talked about it on the podcast we had with him, and it's more than just a transactional environment. So
Yeah.
how are they providing value, right? It's not just about, the volume and procurement and all that, but it's the value that they're providing. So I'm also noticing in that reseller and VAR market that, they're trying to reinvent themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't want to just be a transaction engine.
They're building services. They're building consulting. They're becoming their own ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, but I'll kind of transition, right? So you take those categories, and we'll have a list, when we do the posts and everything. Like I said, I'll put a little note over here down in the corner, right? I'm gonna put up the image from this study that was done.
Mm-hmm.
And I like I said, it's kind of an eye chart. I will put a link as well so people can see it. But I'll say this: number one, no partner lives in just one category anymore,
Mm-mm.
right? We've kind of talked about it with some of the GSIs and stuff. Nobody lives in just one category. You have to figure out where is the most, what is the best intent of value that you can provide, and then where is the overlap. And I think the smart companies are navigating the gray areas more efficiently,
Yeah.
and I think AI is accelerating that.
No, I wouldn't disagree there at all. All right. So, can you give some advice for navigating the ecosystem partnerships? Like, someone needs to understand the business model, or, what else? I mean, I think understanding the business model is pretty important. I hear a lot of companies saying, "Oh, we want to build a partner ecosystem." If you're a small company, I don't know that's really the right way to go. You might become a part of an ecosystem, but I don't think you could build your own. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think your bigger companies can manage that. But what do you think of the
Oof.
advice that you could give to navigating this?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a great question. I think there's a bunch of factors that kind of play into it, right? Understanding what your technology, what is it that you're doing and delivering, and where does it fit? So if you want to try to grow your ecosystem, you got to get out your compass. You got to figure out where are you in
Hmm.
the ecosystem. Like, and the hard part is I mentioned the thing about ego with alliances and stuff, but it is about being honest where you actually are, what, and almost doing an old thing that we used to do, right, John? We used to do SWATs, right? So you want to figure out what your strength, your
Oh,
weakness
right,
is.
yeah.
And the whole point is you're doing it right. You're doing a self-evaluation of the company, of the systems, the technologies, the solution, your go-to-market. And by the way, that
Hmm.
the second one, the weaknesses, everybody has weaknesses, and then also understanding the ecosystem that you play in, meaning your competitors and competition and co-opetition. I think there's
Hmm.
more co-opetition than there's ever been. But God, I'm sorry.
No, no, I'm
Oh,
laughing at your co-opetition. I love that.
co-opetition. I know. Well, the best part of my career has been making up words. You take they used to call them sniglets back in the 80s, right? Where you take two dissimilar words and then you make a new word, right? So co-opetition or frenemy. And people would look at you, but seriously, I think, first of all, self-evaluation, understand where your technology is. I'm going to use my old saying, understand where you sit and how you fit into the ecosystem. What is the true value that you're providing? And what is the benefit that you're going to provide? Not just with the other technologies, but to the actual clients, to the end user. Like, what is that benefit? When you mentioned Apple,
Mhm.
Apple, they always start with the why,
Yep.
right? Why are we doing this? And I think there's a great TED talk with Simon Sinek where he talks about the power of why. And when you think about that, if you haven't seen it, it's one of the most watched ones ever. But
Yeah, yeah.
the premise was, and I'm just sharing this because it's nothing that I've come up with. It's just things that I see or that I've tried to leverage, and that is the reason Apple was able to beat, Microsoft in that market is they were worried about the technical capabilities, the technical functions, and the size, and all these like things that in the end it didn't matter. People just wanted to have something, have it easy, have it usable, and have it accessible. And that's they just I want to have music in my pocket. I don't care if it's got 50 gigs or 10 gigs.
Mhm.
That wasn't important to them. What was important is could they use it, and was it simple, and was it accessible?
Right, right.
And I think that premise still stands in our business today, and that goes back to the point I made before, which is understand where your customer is, understand what their needs are. I think, for depending on what side of the fence you're on, CROs, CMOs, trying to build out an ecosystem from scratch is going to be hard. But obviously, one step at a time, figuring out where are the other technologies that best align with your business model, your
Yeah.
business focus, and figuring out what is that strategic alignment. I don't know if that was too general, but
No, no, that's great. No, I think that covers the bases. I think for someone who's out there listening and they don't understand ecosystems, I think we're just kind of scratching the surface. We're not. It's such a deep subject. Um, there's a friend of the show, former guest Michelle Etherton. She knows how to build partner ecosystems. She was at AWS. She knows that whole, um, you know, blueprint. Jay McBain, another friend of the show. I mean, that guy is the de facto wizard of channel partnerships and ecosystems. If you're in partnership leaders, there's so many people in that organization that can help. So if it's something that's you're talking about and you don't have any idea, I'd suggest we're just a starting point, but I'd suggest you do some
hmm,
research and talk to the people that are doing it and have built it, that are expert in it. It's not something. It's a very complicated process to get it, up and running and working and humming and doing the things that you want it to do.
Well, it takes work.
Hmm.
It's you just as soon as you said Michelle Everton, I remember from our talk with her, she used the term t-shirt size.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're developing the partnerships and you want to have t-shirt sizes, and what that means is, different things are going to fit at different levels for
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
partnerships, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I will say this, it comes back to the advice thing, because I love when you say things and I'm like, damn it. Um, but the ecosystem, first of all, ecosystems are fluid without a doubt. And like I said, they're moving at a much faster clip than I've ever seen, which is a good and bad thing. But the the whole ecosystem is very fluid, and I will say this: the relationship matters more than the actual labels. Remember that. So making sure, because as things move and are fluid, they're going to pivot. And if you try to, if you don't have that relationship, that and you're just kind of stuck on, hey, well, we said it's X, it's going to fail.
Yeah.
And then
That's
the
so
other
true.
piece,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's like anything. You talk about trust, and I'm sorry, you talk about trust, but
No, you're good,
everything's got
man.
to
You're
work.
good. This is funny.
Yes, everything has to be, simpatico. Everything's got to work together. That's what an ecosystem does. Or, it's not disparate systems working, individually. It's disparate systems working together to make everything better. But
Damn.
I love your reference to Michelle's t-shirt size analogy. That is a really good analogy to compare.
Absolutely. Well, look, it's I'm going to use I'm not going to use the same fit thing, but it's, what matters most is make sure that it's relevant, right?
Hmm.
Make sure it's relevant, make sure it fits. And then also you need to have that ability to co-create value. It's not always one, it's the
Yeah,
two
yeah.
together are what are driving the value, right? And aligning, this t-shirt piece, that piece makes me think of the fact that, you got to be prepared to align with the right eco partner player, the right eco partner system at the right time.
Hmm.
And, too many times opportunities are missed because people weren't looking for it,
Hmm. Yeah.
and next thing you know, they kind of look back, and just having an open mind to it. My mind has been more open to things than I've ever realized they would be. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good example. Like it's you don't want to try and force this partnership that's not going to work. And
yep,
I don't know how many times I've been involved in that type of a situation, and you just, if it doesn't work, it's not what's going to make things better or create the perfect scenario for you, right?
absolutely.
So, but listen, we're about at our time here, and I think this is something. I think ecosystems
Right.
a multi, topical, show or episode topic, I should say, because it just touches on so many things, right?
No, absolutely. Well, I just did this, right. So anybody that was listening, they didn't see this, but I'm like, I got my three. So as you were
Good,
talking,
good.
I'm
Do your
constantly
three.
taking notes. Yeah. So number one, right. Know your partner's business model and their
Hmm.
motivations. Understand what their business model is. And you asked about my success in the past. That was always a reason. I understood how people sold, how they got compensated, and then what
Hmm.
motivates them.
Yep.
Very, very important. Second is, you got to learn to speak their language. And what that means is, whether it's technical, whether it's financial, strategic, understanding, how they look to communicate so that you're using the same vernacular.
Hmm.
And then the last is, we've hammered this one a couple times, but it's, you got to bring joint value, right? You got to bring joint value to the table and not just have it in a couple slides. Like, you got to be able to go out and show that you can execute that. I think
Yeah.
they're really my top three takeaways. Um, when I think about how to really engage in an ecosystem, and again, realizing that the lines are blurred, man, and it's no partner is working in one dimensional space anymore. So,
Hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. All right. Listen, we have a great show on coming up next. So want to talk about you want to tee it up because you can
Yeah,
if
I
you
mean,
want.
it's so we want to, and again, just talking through this, I always say it, and again, but I think really the next step is, the channel is changing, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where we left it, right? The lines are kind of blurred, things are getting faster, right? So the channel's changing. Are you ready to ride that next wave? And it's not just about the ecosystem, but it's really the influence of the hybrid go to market and how
Yeah.
AI is accelerating that.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the topic of our next show. So tune in for that. But with that, thanks again, Jeff, for co-hosting. Always interesting and uh, great conversations. For those who are listening, you could find us on most of the podcasting services. I think Spotify is down. I just checked it. I got to recheck it. One of our listeners reached out to me about that, but we're on the majority of the podcasting services are out there. We can be reached at our website, www.channelsurfers.com. If you want to email me or Jeff directly, it's just john@channelsurfers.com or jeff@channelsurfers.com. And then we have our LinkedIn page, which we post every release of every show every Tuesday. And you get some information on the show and, can kind of dig into it from there. But with that, until our next show, thanks for joining, and we'll see you all later.
Awesome. Thanks again,
Cheers.
John. Thanks, everybody.